Mummy, you want to sort out my microphone for me? We're not live yet, are we?
It's actually live. As soon as it's been.
Aha.
I didn't know that.
Sorry, everybody. I'll be on soon. Right. There we go. Okay, good evening. Nice to have you with us. What we're going to do is just have a word of prayer. Then Sarah's going to come up and tell us about peace and what she does with peace and why she does it. And then we'll kind of go into a sort of circle and spend some time praying for peace, praying for what Sarah does, and then praying for each other and for some of the other things that we've been learning about over the summer. So let me start just by praying. Father in heaven, we thank you this evening that we can center our lives around you, around your goodness, your beauty, your truth, your love, your justice, your hope. Thank you that having you at the center of life provides us with meaning, with joy, with comfort, and with peace. And we thank you that you're the God who's promised peace to us through his Son, Jesus. Help us to live every day with thankful and grateful hearts. Thank you for the amazing ways in which you've loved us, watched over our lives, and cared for us. Thank you for the gift of your Son, Jesus. Thank you that you are in touch with us every day, speaking to us through your word and listening to everything that we have to say. And that this evening we can come together as a church family and pray for each other and pray for our city and pray for the world that we live in. We ask you to be with us through this time, to be near, to lead us, to help us, to be with Sarah as she speaks. Father, we just commit this to you in Jesus' name. Amen. I thought I'd start just by reading a little bit from Corinthians. So, it's just the beginning of 2 Corinthians, a few verses. So 2 Corinthians chapter 1, at verse 3. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. For just as the sufferings of Christ flow over into our lives, so also through Christ our comfort overflows. If we're distressed, it's for your comfort and salvation. If we're comforted, it's for your comfort, which produces in you patience and endurance of the same sufferings we suffer. And our hope for you is firm, because we know that just as you share in our sufferings, so also you share in our comfort. We don't want you to be uninformed, brothers, about the hardships we suffered in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, in our hearts we felt the sentence of death. But this happened, that we might not rely on ourselves but on God who raises the dead. He's delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us. On him we've set our hope, that he will continue to deliver us as you help us by your prayers. Then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favor granted us in answer to the prayers of many. So that's a passage I really like and go back to quite frequently. It's just a really helpful reminder that one of the reasons that God allows us to suffer in life is that we might bring the comfort that we've found to others who are suffering. And that's a great thing that we as Christians can do for our city, is to bring comfort to people who are suffering and struggling in life. So I think it's been very good over the last few weeks to have different people coming along, telling us about ways in which they are serving the city and helping people who suffer. And been looking forward to having Sarah come and just tell us a bit. I know a little bit about what Sarah does with Peace, but I don't know a huge amount. So really glad, Sarah, that we've got this opportunity. So I'm going to hand over to you now, and then after a little while, we'll be praying for you and for each other.
There we go. Can we hear me? Perfect. Thank you for the introduction, Neil. And thank you to everybody who's here and everybody who might be watching at home. So, what we'll do is we'll start with trying to make the technology work. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Jen. There we go. Okay, so I'll start with just a brief overview of what the charity is. So the charity that I work for is called Pet and Companion, or Peace for short. And we are a charity that provides canine therapy along for pastoral care for people in need of support and companionship. And our main groups that we go and visit are the elderly, patients receiving palliative care, and students who are going through a tough time. So, as I've put there, we've now made over 1,000 visits. We reached 1,000 actually after year one. After that, we kind of stopped counting. So our aim at Peace is to reduce loneliness and just really generally try and improve people's well-being. And our vision at Peace is to have peace teams, which I'll explain about later, in care homes, in hospitals, in hospices, and on university and college campuses all over the country. Sorry. Next slide. So just a little bit about me. Some of you don't really know me that well. Before setting out Peace, I was a small animal vet working not that far away from here. And it was during my time as a vet that I saw two things. So I'm getting a bit of... Thank you, Jeff. That's great. I noticed two things. First of all, I noticed just the loneliness of many of the people that came in with their animals. I'd frequently be there with the dog, looking at his ear, and then just people would start talking. The lady would start maybe telling me about her own health problems, or the husband at home that was having difficulties. And I often felt quite struck by the fact that I had just 15 minutes to try and examine an animal, diagnose, prescribe, and talk to people who clearly needed someone to talk to. And very often I felt that I was probably one of the only people that that person was speaking to in the day. So it really sort of tugged at the heartstrings each time I had to sort of gently usher them out. But on a more positive note, I also noticed just the amazing benefits of company with animals. And again, a number of people that would say, this is the dog that helped me when my wife died. Or this is the cat that got me through those chemo sessions. There was just this incredible bond between pet owner and animal. And there's just something really quite magical about that. So after a while, I decided to leave veterinary medicine and to set up Pet and Companion. There was clearly an issue. There was a way I thought of helping people. So I had a little bit of experience in pastoral care and PR in a previous life, put these things together, and then the charity came about. So a very important person I should also mention is that black furry person you can see in the photograph. This is Ro. She is my little peace dog. She's an Australian Labradoodle, basically just a big fluffy teddy bear. I wanted to call her Peace in Norwegian, but I don't know how much Norwegian you speak. Peace in Norwegian is Fred. So I thought, maybe for a little girl dog, we should have another thing. And so we went with tranquility. Tranquility in Norwegian is ro. And Ro's a nice, easy name for people to hear and understand, so this is Ro. You'll see more of her as we carry on. Oh dear. There we go. Next slide. Okay, so the issue. So when I started trying to put together Peace, I looked into the figures a bit. Was it just a hunch? Was there actually something to it? And I'll say from the outset, these are pre-pandemic figures. These are from 2016. And I was really looking into this whole loneliness and isolation. And as you can see from the figures, 15% of 16 to 64-year-olds say that they feel lonely most of the time, which is a huge number of people. But this goes up dramatically when you get into the older age group. A third of those over 80 feel it very, very harshly. And it's pretty much all the time. Now, the problem with this going forward is that we actually project that the number of those over the age of 85 will double in the next 20 years. So the problem is only going to be getting worse. But it's not just the elderly that are affected. There's also, unfortunately, a dramatic rise in young people who are being admitted to hospital for self-harming. In fact, in the first 10 years of this century, there were 68% more reported cases of self-harming amongst young people. So clearly there's an issue here that needs to be tackled. So just briefly, for those who aren't aware, canine therapy, what do I mean by that? Well, it's really just using the comforting presence of an animal to help calm people down, to relax them, help them to feel at ease. And at Peace, the dogs also act as an amazing bridge between conversation between those who are being visited and pastoral carers. You'll know yourselves from looking at Joe like this, looking at someone intently like this can be quite intimidating. But if there's a little fluffy person there who's rolling on her back or wanting her tummy strokes or whatever, it just helps calm the mood down and makes it a really pleasant environment to be talking in. Pastoral care, something that many people here will be well aware of, but again, for Peace, what we really mean by this is just attentive, non-judgmental, caring, listening. It's letting people talk through their problems, say what's on their mind, and very often people will resolve some of the issues just by letting it out, by talking and sharing. And that's what we try and help them with. So on to the people that we visit. As I mentioned, one of the groups we visit frequently are the elderly in care homes. Now, sometimes people think that in care homes there are several elderly people and they're all in a room together, or they're all in a house at least together. Surely they've got company, they've got friends. But actually what we've noticed is that many of them don't, very unfortunately. Some of them will stay in their rooms and actually not venture out. Others will be sitting in the sitting room but not actually interacting with each other. And also, unfortunately, many of the care staff are just so busy dealing with the physical needs of people. The daily getting changed, the feeding, the whatever. They just don't have time to sit down and talk to people, which is what so many people are missing desperately. And another thing about the care home residents is that many people actually have owned a dog themselves in the past, or an animal that they may have had to leave behind when they moved into the home. So you should see people's faces when you walk in with a little furry person, little four-footed friend coming in. It just brightens the atmosphere instantly. It's a change from the daily routine. It's something comforting. And this comforting thing goes also with touching the animal. Again, many people in the care homes that we visit, they have no other contact with people other than the basic cleansing routine, let's say, or helping someone get into another chair. There is no other physical contact for many of those that we see. And so being able to just gently stroke a dog and have that sort of warmth and that companionship from the animal and a conversation with the Peace pastoral carers, it just adds something to their days. So just a couple of examples. I've been told to try and keep this short. So I'll talk about Peter. He was a really lovely gentleman I met up in Aberdeen, which is where I started the charity. And he used to be a policeman up there, but he was a policeman in the days when police went around on bicycles. And he was lovely. I'd come into the room and he just adored Ro. He would say, "Oh, it's the bunny wee dog, my wee friend." And every time, "Come here, my wee friend." So Ro would jump up onto his lap and then he'd start blethering. He would just tell me all about the various things he got up to, his adventures and life as a young man up in Aberdeen. And it was wonderful. And our friendship went on for quite some time, actually right until the very last visit I had with Peter. At this point, unfortunately, he was, at the end of his time. And he was in bed, and he was going in and out of sort of lucid moments. So we went in when he was awake, and he was lying down, but he spotted the dog straight away. He went, "Oh, it's the bunny wee dog, my wee friend." And so he came like this and wanted the dog to come up onto his bed. So she did. She went up onto his bed, and he just gently stroked it, and it was just beautiful. He was there, as I say, slipping in and out of consciousness, really. Every time he saw her, he just smiled and kept stroking her. And eventually the nurse was saying, "I think he really needs to rest." He was like, "Oh, no, leave her, my wee friend." And it was a truly beautiful moment that she was able to bring that comfort to him at that time in his life. And another lady, Doreen, she was a lady who unfortunately had no family and very few friends, as I could understand, who lived locally. And we used to go and visit her frequently. And she told me how much she missed church. That was one of the conversations that we had. She told me of the day she used to go as a schoolgirl, and she would go into church, and she'd bring her own dog with her. And she was allowed to get away with this until one day the dog actually started singing during the singing. And she was asked to politely remove the dog from there. But she loved this story, and we talked about it a fair bit. But then again, she was nearing the end of her time, and she was very, very anxious. She was very, very lonely, and I asked her if she wanted someone to pray for her. So we did. And that day it was lovely. I just sort of held her hand, and she had Ro and under her arm like this, and I held her hand and just prayed and just asked that she would not feel so alone, that she knew that she was incredibly loved, that she would feel God's comfort and peace. And she just sat there, and she had tears just falling from her eyes. It was a very touching moment, but I hope and I pray that she felt that she was not alone at the end of that session. Very special lady. So, before we touch on palliative care, I'll just tell you a slightly more cheery story. It sort of fits into the elderly section, but not necessarily all the time. We noticed that the wing of many of the homes we went to, the dementia wings as they were referred to, they really loved the visits. Now, this is a group of people I sort of wondered about initially. How would this work? This idea is really to build up friendships, build up relationships, but if people have difficulty sort of remembering longer term, how could this work? But actually it was wonderful. As many of you will know, people who have dementia may not remember a conversation that was had an hour ago, and yet you can sit them down and start singing a song from 40 years ago, and they'll know every single word perfectly and sing along. And what we discovered with the dogs as well is that, again, many of them will have had dogs in the past, and just bringing the dog in, stroking the dog, just had this amazing effect on people. They felt youthful again, they were remembering things. There were frequent times that staff in the home were telling me that they were having the most lucid conversations with these people during the time that I was stroking the dog, and people who previously couldn't remember their husband's names, coming up with husband's names, and so on. And I generally think that there is something similar to the effect of music, that it's just triggering the brain, triggering areas and recalling happy memories. Anyway, there was one particular lady who loved Ro desperately, and I remember one time she saw me at the door and she came rushing over. She was a tall, slim, kind of ballerina-style lady, and she went to kind of scoop up Ro, and I was terrified she was going to fall over, so I picked up Ro. And then Daphne just took the dog's lead like this and started walking like this around the room. I'm walking the dog. I'm walking the dog. And what was so lovely is that all those who were sitting around were watching this lady, just loving the moment of supposedly taking the dog for a walk. And they all then started laughing, and the staff were smiling, and Daphne was so sort of bowled along by this that she then took us in her arms. So this is me holding my dog, and then Daphne with us, and started waltzing us around the room. And it was just an incredible moment, and just, so wonderful to see people happy and enjoying the company. So, palliative care. Now, again, many of those that we visit will have had dogs at home, and so just seeing a friend coming in is a sort of happiness for them. It's a change from the routine. It takes the focus off the difficult times, the pain, and anxiety for the future. And also, it's been a relief for some of the family members, both for those that are present, because it just takes that pressure off a little bit. There's a dog there stroking, different type of conversation. And then also for relatives who unfortunately can't visit their loved ones that often. I had several people saying they were so pleased that they knew that Ro and I were going to be there every Tuesday. Just that constant companionship. They knew that someone would be there, would be with the person they really cared about. So again, it was support for the people that we would visit, but also for those around them. Now there's one example I'll give you. There's a really wonderful chap, Philip. He unfortunately was suffering from locked-in syndrome, which is basically when your entire body is pretty much rigid, muscles contracted, very, very little movement. And this poor gentleman, he was lying in bed all day, and his day basically consisted of being moved from one side to his back to another side, just to try and prevent horrendous bed sores. And his face was fairly rigid. They didn't think he could see very much, so his quality of life was really quite low. So when they heard that we were coming, they thought, well, let's try. So we went into his room. I just gently started talking to Philip, explaining that I had the dog there and that I was going to put her up next to him if he wanted to feel her, and just gently started talking about it. And so we put Ro up and sort of gently laid his hand onto her fur like this. And it was utterly incredible. This man who is like this, utterly rigid, you could start seeing his hand just gently moving as if he were trying to stroke the dog. And then his face, again, that had been absolutely rigid prior to that, was just gently, almost trying to smile. And the nurses were utterly, utterly amazed. They hadn't seen anything like this for months from this guy. He was incapable of it, they thought. Anyway, he was there for a while, and gently stroking. And we stayed there until he got weary, and it was clearly time for us to go. And what was wonderful was we discovered later that he used to be a dog trainer. So his life had been dogs. They had been his companions. And so it was, again, really wonderful to be able to give him that bit of comfort when very little else could, cheer him at that time. Okay. So students, often when I say that we support students, people look at me a bit strangely. It's like, well, they're young people. Surely they're out having the time of their lives, independent, free from family, and so on. And yes, some of them are. Some of them are having a great time at university, at college, but many, unfortunately, aren't. And what we've discovered is that issues can vary hugely. It can be just the young 17, 18-year-old who's never left home before, never been away from parents, from the dogs, from what he or she knows at home. And that, if you've never had any trauma prior to 17, 18, that's a big deal. And some of them come to us for that, just to have that sort of homely feeling of sitting on a sofa, cuddling a dog, cup of tea, and a chat to someone friendly. Because you'll also have to remember that young people often feel that sort of peer pressure to have it all together, that kind of social media, Instagram happiness that is just so unrealistic, and yet many people think that's how it should be. So as I say, they range hugely from perhaps that sort of situation to those who are dealing with various sort of disability issues, academic struggles, identity issues, and right up to, sadly, those who are suffering just the most horrendous abuse. It's really quite shocking. But what we are able to do at Peace is we're that kind of halfway house. We're not their family, but equally we're not the academic professionals, we're not an intimidating professional body, we're kind of in the middle. And for many students it's just that coming in, having someone to talk to, and that sort of cozy moment is what they need. Some of them, as I said, who've had horrendous issues, we're also there to be able to say, look, I think we'll need to fast track you to counselling, or explain what would happen if they went to see a GP about perhaps some of their mental health issues, and just talk them through the process, make it less intimidating for them. And it's been, an exciting time with these students. And one girl, I'm just thinking, looking up there, one girl we'll call Rachel. She was just the most courageous young woman. She had so much going on. She was in her second year when I first met her. She had disability issues herself that made life incredibly painful. So many health issues. She came from a broken and very difficult home life. There was alcoholism, there was abuse. And not surprisingly, this took its toll on her academic life. She was struggling with studies, all of these things compounded together. And anyway, Rachel started coming frequently. She came every week. and we were able to talk through some of the issues and then pointed towards support that she could be receiving. And we established a really, really good relationship. She was a fantastic girl and just, as I say, incredibly courageous. And what was great was that she told the chaplaincy where we were based up in Aberdeen, she said that knowing that she was coming to see us every Thursday out there, it actually got her out of bed, it got her out of the flat, got her to campus, into her lectures, knowing at the end of the day she was going to get a cuddle from Ro, a cup of tea and a wee chat with me, which was great. And I'm pleased to say she graduated 2 years ago, got her master's degree, and she's now gainfully employed and in a good place. So, happy story. Great. So how can you help? Now, one of the reasons that Neil so kindly let me talk is that, as I said, we were up in Aberdeen, and we're still in Aberdeen with volunteers out there, but I've now moved back to Edinburgh with my family, and I'm really keen to get Peace up and running here in Edinburgh. Now, the pandemic has obviously delayed things a little bit, but hopefully we will soon be launching in-person visits here. But in order to do that, I need peace teams. So I need people with a keen interest in pastoral care who also happen to have a lovely, gentle dog. So if you know anyone like that, please suggest becoming a peace team. It really is one of the most rewarding things you can do with a couple of hours a week. And obviously, in order to make this happen, we do need funding as well. Now, I appreciate I'm in an environment where people probably already give very generously, and we can't support everything. But if this is something that's touched you and you're able to help, then please do. It would be hugely, hugely appreciated. Just £10 a month over the course of a year covers half the setup costs of a new peace team. So that's effectively a cup of coffee a week. You could be making a massive difference to someone's life. And then finally, spreading the word. Please do tell people about peace, especially those who may be interested in volunteering or indeed helping us fund our activities. I'd really, really appreciate that. And for further information, you've got the website details there. For those of you who are here, there are bookmarks with that information. For anyone at home, you can just send me an email and I would love to answer any questions you may have. So thank you for listening.
Sarah, stay there for a minute, just if anybody wants to ask any questions or
Sure.
elicit further information.
Yes, please feel free if anyone has anything they want to know.
This isn't a question, it's just, I guess, a supporting comment. My late mother had dementia, and she was in a cross-reach home for almost 7 years.
Yeah.
And I always went in the evening, so this was after the visits, but I know that they had someone came in with a dog, and that the residents apparently absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
It was a specialist home, so everyone there had dementia.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good to know they had a dog visiting.
So I have two questions actually. The first one is, why do you think pets are more efficient than maybe human beings in therapy, this kind of therapy? The second is related to my work actually. They're starting to think of making robots who look like dogs or seals
Yes.
and bringing them into nursing homes. Do you think that would work as well?
Well, the honest answer to question number 2 is probably not. And yet, there is some science, obviously, as you're probably aware, behind what you're saying. Because the act of stroking an animal can help reduce your heart rate. There's the warmth, there's the comfort, and so on. But it's also thought that just the sight of a dog produces oxytocin, which is the love chemical that mothers and young babies have, for example. So potentially your robots, that if they look sweet enough, there could be that sort of endearing quality. I know it's widely used in Asia, isn't it? Just it's been quite successful.
And about my first question, why do you think pets are better than humans in this kind of therapy?
Well,
Assistance?
yeah. I mean, we're a bit different from most animal therapies in that we have the pastoral care as well. So the humans are actually a really important part of it. But the animal part, I think there's no judgment there. They're kind, they're sweet. They just see someone who perhaps needs help. I'll give you an example. The very first visit I ever did with Ro, for example, there was a gentleman who was very, very disabled. He was sitting in a wheelchair. His body was not as we would expect it to be, for example. And I worried about her. I thought, this is not what she's used to seeing. What will she do? What she did was she went straight up to him. She put her head on his knee like this and just looked up at him. And the man, he started sort of putting his hand through her hair and everything. And he said, ooh, she feels like cotton wool. And he had this massive, great grin. So I think it's something about that. They're so approachable, and they have this sixth sense of sort of knowing particularly who perhaps needs their comfort. Humans, well, we're complicated, aren't we? We come in with our preconceptions, our judgments, perhaps. And the person being visited might also look at that person and kind of think, what is it they're here for, perhaps? Whereas an animal is, in this context, is clearly there for nothing other than bringing comfort and making people smile. But yeah, good luck with the project.
So a peace team is like a person and their pet?
Yes, it's the pastoral carer, which is us, and the dog. That makes a peace team.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were saying there's a cost to sort of getting a peace team established. Is that a training cost as well? So do people get training initially?
Yeah, that's right as well. And again, this differs from some of the animal therapies that already exist as well. Yes, every volunteer receives training in mental health first aid and attentive listening. They also attend a dementia awareness course, so that everybody going in has at least some idea of some of the things they should be looking out for, things they should pick up on, and know when to move on and pass on to more professional care if required as well. So yes. The dogs are all vet tested, so they all have to go to an independent vet to be sure that they are suitable for going into homes and going into places where people are vulnerable. So yeah, there is training and testing.
So is that about the animal's temperament then?
That's right, yes. Unfortunately, we can't have bouncy dogs going into where people might risk falling over. So, yes. Some of the more sort of what might be considered vicious-looking dogs can be incredibly gentle. It's a question of ownership often, actually. But yes, it's true that a more sort of soft and approachable-looking dog is probably a better option. But we don't discriminate. If they're a good, sweet dog, they're all welcome.
So if we can think of people who have a dog and a suitable dog and a suitable interest, just let them know about you.
Yeah. I mean, what better way to spend a couple of hours with your dog? Helping other people,
Makes me want to get a nice dog just to hear it. So.
Oh, please do.
Good. Well, why don't we sort of circle round a bit and we can pray for Sarah and then we spend a little time praying for one or two other things. So try and keep a reasonable distance. I think 1 metre is our new